Hello, my name's Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video where today we're going to be going through the best Game Week 30 wildcard team that you can produce. Of course, if you're going to be wildcard in Game Week 30, we're also assuming that you're going to be free hitting in Game Week 34. So bear that in mind with the team, and let's jump straight into it.
Okay, so starting off in goal and with the defence, we've gone with Petrovic in goal. You don't even need to explain the Chelsea picks, to be honest. They've got an unbelievable fixture run, and then they've got a chance of 2 to 3 doubles as well in that time. We just need to see where they're sort of going to be placed for definite. Obviously, Petrovic has been decent since coming into that Chelsea team. I don't think there's a chance of him losing his spot necessarily, unless there's maybe rotation to FA Cup, but we're really, clinging on to straws really in terms of rotation. I think he's a decent option. Burnley at home as well for this week is a really nice one to bring him in. Similar to Gusto as well. Obviously, he's got good attacking data as well for that Chelsea team, and obviously defensively, Chelsea's not been the best this season. But you'd hope in a fixture against Burnley, they should be able to keep a clean sheet at Stamford Bridge. What's your thoughts on that Chelsea defence, Ben? And would you be doubling up on a wild card this week?
Yes, I really like the Chelsea double up. Of course, there is some sort of risk with doubling up with Chelsea just because of how inconsistent that they have been. And there's obviously a double up in defence means that you can't double up in attack. So it's basically weighing up whether you think that Gusto and Petrovic together will score more points than potentially someone like Nicholas Jackson in your team. Of course, there's the risk with Jackson on the number of yellow cards he's on. He's not far away from another suspension. But yes, I do think the Chelsea double up is a potential wise move to make. But of course, it's putting your eggs in a lot of, in one sort of Chelsea sized basket with the defenders. And we know that we sort of can't always trust them. The only other sort of thing you have to consider here is if Reece James does potentially sort of come back before the end of the season, whether he does replace Gusto or not. Gusto is in such good form that I think that Reece James maybe wouldn't go straight back into the starting 11, but the quality he has obviously means that there's some element of risk with that.
100%. Then moving on to the other two defenders, we've got Jamal Lascelles up first. Obviously, Sven Botman's been confirmed out for the rest of the season with an ACL injury. We have to sort of wait and see whether Lascelles comes straight back into the team. For me, I think he will. Obviously, there's still no Trippier as well at the moment, and Pope is yet to return. So it's not the strongest Newcastle backline, and we've seen that in recent weeks. They've been one of the worst defences in the league. So you must be asking, why on earth have you got a Newcastle defender in there? But he is 3.9 million, so you're really saving a lot of budget in this team, which, spoiler alert, has 2 premium assets in it. You could potentially say 3 even. So yeah, for me, he's a decent asset to own. You don't have to play him every week. Obviously, we've got players on the bench that we will discuss in a moment. And yeah, saving that budget is key here. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, really like both the two. And for Jamal Lascelles, really, the price that you're getting at, there's no risk associated with that. So yeah, I see no reason why you wouldn't have him in. It's a bit of a gift for FPL managers, considering, and you're going to need probably someone as some sort of coverage really for Dubravka, just because he is still going to be really highly owned going into the next few game weeks.
Yeah, and then moving on to Dragusin. Obviously, Van der Ven, similar sort of situation, has got injured. Dragusin is only 4.2 million as well. So we're really cheaping out in this defence of the most expensive defender who's starting at the moment at 4.2 million. But he's going to get those Spurs clean sheets. It gives you good coverage for the likes of Porro and Udoji. Obviously, he's not going to get attacking returns, don't get me wrong, but you're saving, compared to Porro, almost like nearly £2 million in budget, which for me, I think, Pedro Porro, in my eyes, is not going to be worth £2 million in attack and returns. So yeah, I think he's a decent little enabler. Allows you to spread those funds into better attacking assets. And then the Spurs defense has been decent at the start. They've dropped off a little bit in recent weeks, but with their fixtures coming up like Luton at home this week, I think it's a decent option. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, decent option indeed. Of course, because he's so cheap, this is the main reason that he's in.
Yeah.
We obviously don't expect Spurs to keep a clean sheet every week because they haven't all season, really. But it's the fact that you can triple up on the best three, well, at least the best two attacking Spurs guys in there and enabling you to go with a bit of a cheaper defence. Means you can really push on. And towards the end of the season, we always see a few more goals. even game week 38 averages sort of 30 to 40% more goals than a usual game week. So we're not going to anticipate too many sort of defensive returns from a lot of these guys. But it's all about focusing on absolutely maximising the points going forwards in your team.
Okay, then moving on into the midfield, we've got a five-man midfield here in the 3-5-2 setup. Starting off with Mo Salah, we discussed him in our transfer targets video, so make sure you do check that out as well. Really nice option. Obviously, he's so premium. He's back. He's fit. Brighton at home this week. We've got Sheffield United fixture next week. They're then doubling game week 34 as well. It's a ridiculous run for those Liverpool assets. For me, he's a must-own. What is he for you, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely must own. And the big decision here for FPL managers is whether to bring him in this week or next week. If you're wildcarding this week, then it's absolutely essential to include Salah in there. We've even seen sort of off the back of the injury, he's come back in, he's still getting attacking returns off the bench. He's still getting attacking returns in limited minutes. And with the two fixtures they got in the next two game weeks against teams in, let's just fair to say, the lower half of the league in terms of XG conceded, I think it's a no-brainer really to include Salah in your team.
Yeah, and then moving on, obviously, another essential player in my eyes, especially for the run that's coming up, is Cole Palmer. Had an absolutely ridiculous season. I think he's a dead cert for penalties now as well, with Sterling absolutely fluffing his lines against Leicester in the Cup. Yeah, I think he's just a ridiculously good asset, and one that will go down in like FPL folklore for how cheap he was at the start of the season and now how good he has become this season. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what price I brought him in for. It was less than 5 million, that's for sure, that I brought him in for in game week 7 or game week 8, and he's stayed in since. He's been fantastic, and I think regardless of the fixture, he has potential to score. We saw him against Manchester City at home score a big double-digit haul, so he can score it against anyone. And I think, yeah, like you said, a dead cert. Even better that he's got the double game week fixtures that he's got coming up as well.
Yeah, and then moving on to some probably more, I guess you say, transitional picks. Phil Foden's up next. It's between him and Bukayo Saka in this sort of draft setup. Obviously, Bukayo Saka is about a million-ish more than him, so it all depends on your budget. This budget suits around, I think, a 102 to 103 million pound team value. It's what my team value is basically, and I know my team value is not very high at all. So yeah, Phil Foden, obviously City. I've got this sort of title run coming up alongside the Champions League, which is potentially something that might put you off in terms of rotation. But he's been in ridiculous form so far this season. I think for me, between him and Saka, it is tough, but I think I would just edge Foden at the moment. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, Man City's fixture run as well is ridiculous after this Arsenal game.
Yeah, their fixture run is really, really good. I'm more concerned about the rotation than the fixtures, to be honest with you. I think it's like something like 7 games in 18 days or something like that. They've got a big run of fixtures coming up in all competitions, really. The FA Cup, Champions League, Premier League. So there's always going to be that risk. But like you said, he's in such good form that it's difficult not to pick him in any team. And a lot of managers are going to have difficulty moving into Salah if you're not wildcarding in game week 30 and 31. It may have to be Foden that sort of releases those funds. So to be able to sort of have him and include him for City's great fixture run is always nice to have.
Yeah, another thing as well, see, Man City do double in game week 37. So if that title run, which I think a lot of FPL managers, especially doing this sort of strategy of game week 30 wildcard, free hit 34, and then bench boost 37, if you're doing that strategy, you're going to want the title race, to go all the way to the wire in game week 38 to get the most out of these players in terms of minutes. Moving on to a double up in Spurs in the attack, we've got Richarlison and Son. Obviously, if Richarlison starts, I think he plays as the 9, which then sort of negates Son. If Richarlison doesn't start, it makes Son a much better asset. So you're sort of covering both bases here if the one plays in each other's position sort of thing. Obviously, Richarlison is yet to sort of play a minute yet since coming back from his injury. He was on the bench for Brazil against England in the international break. I think he'll be sort of phased in, but if I was wildcarding, I'd happily sort of take maybe a benching against Luton just to have him for the foreseeable future. Obviously, you won't need to have him in game week 34 where they blank. You'll be free hitting in here, so that's not a problem. What's your thoughts on that double up, Ben?
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. And in terms of the highest point ceiling for any Spurs players, these two have the highest ceiling, alongside potentially like someone like Porro, perhaps with the set pieces, etc. So yeah, I think these two have the highest ceiling. Of course, Richarlison playing up front negates Son, yes, but in transition against teams, Son's going to be a good asset regardless. So I do think these two are decent considerations, and I think Son is a must-have. Richarlison maybe not so much, but it all depends on where your sort of team value lies and sort of where you're looking to go in your team, because you could go for different options, but in terms of a sort of ideal triple up, you probably want a couple of Spurs attackers in there.
Okay, so then moving up to our forward line, it's starting off with Erling Haaland. It's been a little while since I think everyone's had him in their starting 11s, but he's definitely a must-own if he is back fit. Obviously, he's sort of pulled out of international break with a standard March international break injury, let's just say. Arsenal obviously at home for this game week. I'd probably not back against him in terms of him playing at the Etihad. For me, I'll probably be going without him in game week 30 though, which is obviously a big risk. I think his ownership will be sort of lower at the moment because obviously a lot of managers obviously taking him out of their teams due to doubles elsewhere and stuff like that. So I don't think his ownership will be as high. It'll be interesting to see though. For me, he's obviously a must-own on the wildcard. As we mentioned, I know City have a lot of fixtures, as Ben mentioned earlier. But if the title race is still open and they're still going for the Champions League, I think he plays in both, like we saw last season. He's actually not that. He doesn't get rotated too much, as we saw last season as well. If City need to win, he usually maybe starts the game and then gets taken off early if they're sort of leading by a comfortable margin, rather than the other way around where he gets benched, like maybe De Bruyne would be getting benched. That's my thoughts on him. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think Haaland is a must-have simply. A lot of managers considered benching him or not even owning him because of how many sort of decent assets there are at high value. I do simply think you have to have him, especially for when the fixtures turn. He can score against anyone. Yes, he got negated a bit against Arsenal earlier on in the season, but will that happen twice in a row? It's difficult to imagine that happening. I'd definitely have Erling Haaland in.
Yeah, and then our other forward starting here is Darwin Nunez. Obviously, he's on 8 yellow cards, which could maybe throw you off if he was to pick up a yellow card against Brighton this weekend. But I think he's worth the risk. He's probably, as we mentioned in our transfer plans video, the second best Liverpool player to own. Crazy amounts of expected goals, expected assists, all that sort of jazz. I think, he's just such a good FPL asset to own. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, really like the pick, really like Darwin in there. Again, earlier on in the season, we could say, he's a bit of a meh pick because he wasn't finishing off his chances, but he's starting to finish off the chances, just like we talked about with Nicholas Jackson in the transfer targets video. Darwin is starting to produce, and I do think he is going to be as close you can get to essential come game week 34.
Yeah, and then touching on to our bench then, these are going to be players that are really crucial actually in terms of this strategy, because obviously we're going to need them for the bench boost in game week 37, and obviously they need to rotate in and out with these players that are starting as well. So Andre Onana is our bench keeper for this game week. Him and Petrovic rotate really good over the next few weeks. They both double as well in game week 37. They're both predicted to double in game week 37, should I say, because it's not confirmed just yet. Onana as well, he's been one of the top scoring goalkeepers in FPL this season just due to the amount of shots that he's facing. United have conceded a lot of shots and he gets a lot of save points as well. And to be fair, in recent weeks United have been keeping clean sheets as well, which is a big plus. So yeah, him for me is probably the best goalkeeper to own. Even if you're trying to just own one goalkeeper, I think he's the best one to own for the remainder of the season. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, don't mind the Onana pick. Obviously, it's the clean sheets that are of a concern. He's high point scoring for a reason. So yeah, that I don't mind, especially if you're looking sort of long term on maximising both the doubles. I think that's a necessary evil, perhaps.
Yeah, and then moving on to our bench players, we've got Rasmus Højlund on the bench this game week. You could probably argue that you could start him this game week, to be fair, with a Brentford away fixture. Obviously, he was injured towards the back end before the international break. He is on the international duty with Denmark, though, so I wouldn't be too worried about his fitness. When he has been playing for United, he has been scoring, and he's quite a decent price. I think he's 7 million at the moment, so I'd probably be getting him in right now and sort of getting in before those price rises. For me, if it's between him or Garnacho, I'd much rather have him because he's just got such good goal threat, whereas Garnacho is probably more assist threat when he's out playing on the right. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that sort of evolves in the next few weeks. Obviously, United are projected to double in game week 37, as previously mentioned with Onana. So yeah, really nice option for there. And United's fixtures, even up to that, aren't even too bad as well. So you've got some decent fixtures in the run up with that. Is he your favourite United asset, Ben, or would you be looking elsewhere?
In terms of value, I think obviously the sheer cheapness of Garnacho is
Yeah.
what's going to be appealing for managers, and we know that there's been a plethora of options sort of in that 5 to 6 million price bracket that people have been hopping on. So for a lot of managers, this might be easier to hop on and off players like Garnacho, and obviously only three spots up front in striker. A lot of managers are going to be loyal to Ollie Watkins, Dom Solanke, Erling Haaland, etc. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think Hoyland gives really good value there, especially with the double coming up, especially with the form that he's been shown over the last few weeks. I do think he is definitely a differential pick, definitely a little bit of a biased pick as a United fan that you are, Josh, but also not a bad pick at all.
Yeah, and then moving on to the two remaining defenders, again, we're sort of cheaping out on these two. It's Joe Gomez up first, which is a potential risk pick, to be fair. He's obviously not a nailed on starter for Liverpool. There's Trent out injured at the moment, but even Conor Bradley would potentially play there. Kanate's potentially injured as well, so that there's players on the fringe of coming back. So maybe for 1 or 2 weeks, Gomez could be a good shout. Even when those players have been fit, we have seen Gomez being deployed further forward in like a midfield role as well. So I don't think he's necessarily a horrendous pick. But if you're trying to get maybe a more nailed player, then I'd definitely look somewhere else. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
I think it's a bit of a risk, just because, of course, you've got potential rotation risk of Gomez, and it is very high and very realistic that he doesn't get sort of all the minutes, and especially sort of compile that with the fact that it's gone very cheap with the defence anyway, with another rotation risk potentially if Reece James is back in Gusto. So it is a big risk. The rewards are there if they double and he goes big, but again, is that a risk you should be taking? I think going a little bit safer on the defenders for minute security as well is always a good strategy to have, because there's nothing worse than preparing for a bench boost and one of your players isn't guaranteed to get those full 90 minutes.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. And then our final defensive pick is someone who is definitely more nailed than Joe Gomez. It's Van Heck. He's played 90 minutes in every single game since game week 11. So he's pretty nailed. Obviously, I'd say that Lewis Dunk is probably more nailed than him if you can afford to stretch up to him. But for 4.1 million, you're getting someone who's going to definitely get minutes, potentially doubling in game week 37, which is perfect for your bench boost as well. So for me, I'm happy to have him sat on my bench up until that game week. Limited attack and returns, but he's going to get those appearance points. And we even saw with, Zabani last double game week, you never know what happens in a double game week. They throw up all sorts of madness. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, there's always going to be some sort of double game week madness coming up, and we'll see what happens. Brighton have not been the best defensively, have they, over this season? So we'll see what happens. But again, bit more of a minutes secure player under De Zerbi. Obviously, the wing backs is annoyingly, if the wing backs were secure in minutes, we'd be 100% going for them. But there's four wing backs that we never know who's going to play, and that if they do play, they play 45. So that's always a risk with those guys. So you're almost better off going with a bit more security in that regard, especially if you're going for Brighton.
Okay, so that wraps up our best Game Week 30 wildcard draft. Let us know what your thoughts about the wildcard are in the comments. Are you wildcarding this week, or are you saving it for 31, or even potentially later, like Ben, potentially in like Game Week 35? Let us know your strategy in the comments.
Yeah, and please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I've been Ben,
I've been Josh.
and we'll see you guys
Later. Have a good game week, everyone.